Yes, we are live
There we
now,
go.
and good morning to everybody watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and also listening to us in Clubhouse this morning. We have a guest or a kind of guest we don't usually have on our podcast. And for this reason, I would once again say that today's guest is a very special one. And I am very pleased to say welcome to Emanuel Pastreich. I hope that I do not mispronounce your family name, Emanuel. And I want to give a very brief introduction of you before we go into the thank you for our sponsors, and then we dive into today's topic. To anybody who hasn't met Emmanuel yet, Emmanuel is the Asian Institute president, and he is also director for the Center for Truth, Politics, and Green Liberty. We're not going to talk about politics today, but just this is for your information. Yes. To know. You can look up Emmanuel on LinkedIn and connect with him there. So it will be a pleasure, I believe, for everybody to connect with him. Also, what makes Emmanuel very unique speaker on our podcast is that Emmanuel was a presidential candidate in the United States of America full time from 2020 to 2024. So, Emmanuel, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to be a guest speaker and to also talk about something which is close to your heart, I believe, since you're based in Japan now. But before we go into that, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, first sponsor, that is Kanchu, or as they are known online, kanchu.com. You can find them at kanchu.com, or you can also connect with James Howell, james at kanchu.com. The company is based in Yokohama. They do buying projects in buying and selling real estate, also real estate investment and property management. We have worked with them for a while. We know James, he's our friend as well, and that's why we feel honored and very happy to represent the company here on this live stream. Thank you to Kanachu, and now we are back to the podcast here with Emmanuel. Emmanuel, what is your Japan story first
Yep.
and foremost?
What
My
got you
Japan
here?
story.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so this is my, I don't know if I call it my second coming, but it's my second time living in Japan for a long time now, 2.5 years. And I originally studied here in 1987 to 1992, and maybe a little bit different than a lot of, I'm American, a little bit different in that I entered the master's program at University of Tokyo, and I did all my program in Japanese. I wrote my master's thesis on classical literature, 18th century, and then I went back to Harvard eventually for a PhD. I was originally, as an undergraduate, a Chinese major, and I taught Japanese literature at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Then I spent many years in Korea, and very recent, well, not so recently, a year and 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago, I came back to Japan with Asia Institute, and I've been working, giving talks, writing articles, essays, reports, and catching up with Japan, which I feel now is really the one of the greatest places to be. I mean, not just in Asia, but in the world. It's one of the most open societies and one of the freest societies. And I my hope is I'm not going to talk about politics, but I am obviously was very engaged in the United States, concerned about the United States, and it's my hope working together people like Maya and Tim that we can create a real ecosystem here in Japan of Japanese, obviously. I work primarily in Japanese, but also of internationals from around the world. And Japan, I think, is the greatest sort of platform for the sort of international efforts we'd like to create, to work on for peace, for a sustainable life for everybody, and to try and, I think, get our culture back on track, as it were.
Right. So you said that you want to create a more international Japan,
Mm.
if right. So what does it mean for you, a more international Japan? Because it means also, or probably you can explain how you see Japan
Mhm.
at the moment,
Right.
and how you see it becoming more international.
Right. Well, so I'm not here to preach, and I'm
Right.
open to all sorts of different perspectives, and in some degree, if you're talking about international in terms of uh, everyone has to speak English or it has to be American standards for everything, that's not really me. I mean, I do all my work in Japanese. I write in Japanese for the most part. Well, I would half and half, and
Mhm.
being engaged with Japanese in Japan is very important to me. However, I think that Japan is uniquely positioned. I think of say among the G7 countries, I think it has one of the most receptive, flexible, open environment. It has the assets are enormous in terms of research in the sciences, the level of education, the preservation of traditional culture, which is something you don't find in every country, the confidence that Japanese have about their own identity, the openness. I mean, when I first came here in 1987, being a foreigner was not so easy. But now I think that's not true at all. I find people to be extremely friendly, and there's a decency in Japan. In the United States, I once made a mistake of calling the police to help me with something, which I, I realized very quickly it was I should not have done. But in Japan, police are extremely respectful, friendly, knowledgeable, and they really feel a sense of responsibility to be helpful to citizens. And that's something that's really impressed me. I've been impressed by people in in companies, in the government, the sort of sense of responsibility, and the knowledgeableness of Japanese, the general level of I mean, if one contrasts the United States tends to be a relatively small group, say 5-6% of the population, which is extremely well educated and
Mhm.
has, in some ways, the best scholars, the best business people, the best artists you can find anywhere. But the vast majority of Americans' level of education is not that high. And they don't know foreign languages, obviously. They don't have the basis in science and technology, et cetera. But in Japan, it's quite different. The level of your ordinary citizen is quite high. Their engagement in the world is high. They read. They you know, it's a different sort of ecosystem, and that is really exciting to me, especially at this particular historical moment when we see such uncertainty, not just in terms of say markets, but in terms of culture, right,
Mhm.
and identity. That Japan has a relatively stable environment, and it has tremendous appeal for me as a Japan expert. I mean, I was in Korea for 14 years, so obviously it's a big change to be back here, and there's a reason for that. But I have friends, and maybe Tim does as well, in the United States who are asking me, how do I get to Japan? Right? It's like it has that appeal. I have some friends in
Yeah.
America. They decided they wanted to go to England or to Europe or to New Zealand or Australia. But in fact, Japan is in Asia. Asia has this it's burgeoning sort of booming part of the world economy overall. And it has sort of in terms of technology, in terms of science, in terms of education, in terms of culture, in terms of reading, writing. It has sort of these assets which are not really matched in those other countries. And Germany, countries like Germany or England, France, there are some sort of some extremism there in the culture and politics that you don't really have in Japan. So Japan, I think, although the language can be a barrier for obviously
Mhm.
people coming in out of the from nowhere, it still has appeal. It still has appeal.
Yeah, I think when I look at Japan as a society and their education system, I see critiques of it that are valid, of course, right? Any
Mhm.
system, any culture. but I always believed that they were masters at mastering the basics at a very high level. And they didn't try to jump to the fancy schmancy stuff. And I saw it in manufacturing too.
Right.
And so they had this extremely high average level,
Right.
plus the collectivist, team play mindset. And when you combine that like common level of education, because it's relative to the US, it's standardized. There's not as much of a gap between, for example, in the US, a nice neighborhood with great teachers versus a poor
Oh, for
neighborhood,
sure.
who collect less property taxes because they're poor, right? And
Right.
the vicious cycle continues, and you see this huge gap. But in Japan, that bell curve is tight and it's skewed higher
Up.
than on
Right.
average than like my country, I would say, right? So that's a really powerful combination. And so you could critique the Japanese system. It doesn't promote freedom and creativity, and there is some truth in that, but there's also a lot of value in mastering the basics, and I've seen it in business as well. So I agree with everything you said. Like, to the Japanese, there's this potential, and there's a will to
Absolutely.
there. I found Japanese very reasonable, but what they need is to be exposed to these interactive international situations, whether it's in socially or in business. Like, that's about all it takes not a mediator, but someone to help translate the experience. If there's a language gap and a culture gap, that helps a lot, which
Right.
is what I made my living doing, right?
Mhm.
But what I found was, if it's done properly, the Japanese are very open. They're very
Yeah.
willing to
I
adapt,
think so
but they
too.
never had the chance before, right?
Right.
And the same with, I would say the same about my country, folks in my country. You put them in the right situation, give them context and a basic understanding, most of them do pretty well. So,
Right.
like, I kind of believe in people, but you still got to create that situation. And that's, again, I'm
Right.
talking like micro level, because that was my space. I think your level is maybe more a little bit on the like what policies will also contribute to creating those opportunities. Is that a good characterization of?
Right. Well, I mean, in terms of my work, I've written in sort of general issues, and I should say I did most of my work in Korea until the last uh, 3 years, last 2 years.
Right.
But one of the things in the case of Korea, and I see this potential here in Japan at least as much, is to say, look at what best practices are for local government, for example, how people run their. I mean, for example, in Seoul, Arisu, the water purification system, it's like one of the best in the world in Seoul, and we see this in Japan as well. But Koreans don't know. They don't know how good their systems are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so those basic issues, trying to identify what's unique. I mean, for example, scuba as this science park, a technology advanced research cluster. So I worked with 3E Group in scuba. This is now 15 years ago. They have some of the best research in the world. I mean, not just in Japan, and in some fields, whether it's in biology, botany, they're way advanced over the United States in terms of the breadth of the research and what's available. So the question was in 3E, how do you bring it together, both in Japan and then internationally? And one of the reasons why it's taken a while for Japan to bring these things, their assets together, as it were, is that Japanese are so used to it, they don't think it's so extraordinary.
Yeah.
And maybe the best example of that is in the United States. So they passed 3 years ago the CHIPS Act. The United States then started trying to build factories for wafer fabrication in the United States. I think it was in Texas and Arizona, and quickly ran into problems because in the United States you have extraordinary professors at Stanford or Harvard, right, MIT, But in terms of people who work in a factory, right, United States does not have people with the basic command of sort of math, basic physics that you need to work in a semiconductor factory. And so, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
so I ran an American factory in the mid 90s. Like I was the plant manager, and all our workers on the factory floor came from India, the Philippines, Mexico, China. Like we had like a dozen different countries. They were all immigrants, and they were the best employees because their math scores were high.
Right.
There was a language barrier, but the intelligence and the education was there. So I was like, okay, I could work around the language barrier, right? And
sure.
it was very difficult to find local Americans who could pass sixth grade math. And we actually hired tutors for people. We'd bring them in as temporaries, and if they could pass the sixth grade test, we'd hire them. So that was in the mid 90s. That was a problem for me, and thank goodness I had these immigrants, these highly talented, hardworking, first generation immigrants who just really saved me. So I had the same experience. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, it's a real challenge for the United States right now. So the CHIPS Act is sort of like, I don't know how much it was, $60 billion, $80 billion to fund, to support these new factories that are going to be built. But they haven't really, I don't know what the status is right now. It hasn't really worked quite as well as people imagined because Americans just don't have that level. And Japan. So a lot of these very, humble Japanese you see out there, they have sort of basic level of education, and not just education, in terms of interaction with people, the sort of respect for your fellow human, being part of the team, as Maya said, this sense of culture, also a respect for learning, respect for culture, for art, for music, that it has value in the culture and continuity. I mean, Japan has been a leader in the arts, in technology for the last couple thousand years. Didn't suddenly happen overnight. And that continuity is impressive to me, even inspiring.
Yeah, you even see that. I mean, go way back. Rice farming, they learned it from, most people believe, from China. They mastered it and learned to grow it in all these different climates too. Like they modified it to adapt, right? So and their yield was so high. Like the labor was not efficient, but they had lots of humans, throw humans at it. And the output, though, the yield, they brought it to another level. So even going at, as early as rice farming, you can already see that improvement trend to refine. And my theory has always been, if you come from a place with limited natural resources, you have to utilize your resources. You have to be resourceful because you don't have natural resources, right? And that limitation pushed Japanese to be very creative and more into the refinement of things based on the limitations imposed by those lack of natural resources, right? But they had lots of humans, though. That was their strength.
Absolutely. Smart, well-organized humans. And Japan, I mean, we have a sort of a myth or a story that we learned about how Japan was very far behind. And then the West came in the Meiji period, and there was these reforms, and suddenly Japan took off. But it's not really all that accurate because first, for example, in the 17th century, Japan, as we know from the Hideyoshi invasion of Korea and other things, that Korea's position, Korea was, that Japan was leading technologically in the metalworking, for example. It was the first country which had standardized artillery, right? So you could use the same bullet in different guns. It was one of the first countries that, across farming, manufacturing, porcelain was across the board extremely sophisticated. Tokyo, Edo was the largest city in the world, had one of the most sophisticated logistics systems in the world. So in fact, Japan was a leader. It sort of fell into decline in the early 19th century, as
Right.
did
Yeah.
East Asia. But overall, it has a long history.
Yeah,
It,
and even like I recall Reischauer saying that when Shotoku Taishi systematically brought in Confucianism,
Right.
Buddhism, and Japanized it to fit them. He said within the next 300 years, that infusion of Chinese culture boosted Japan in terms of cultural development beyond Europe. They were behind Europe at that point,
Absolutely.
right? And
Absolutely.
it was like this jump start they got in the next 300 years, and then they came into their own. When you hit the
Right.
Muromachi
Right.
period, you start
Right.
really
Right.
seeing, So even then, they were like innovative in doing that, right?
I think
So
so. It's
yeah,
impressive. I mean,
there is something which I also want to mention because you said, rice culture, and that's absolutely true, of course. But in addition to that, when you live in a closed society or small communities, you have to perform, right? And you have to level
right.
up to the level of your peers as well.
peer pressure.
The peer pressure, yes. And I think that's also another factor that played a big role in Japan becoming what it is nowadays. I mean, moving so fast forward, and despite the declines that sometimes occurred, it is still a country that has so much to offer, and it is so much advanced in many different areas of life. So yeah,
Absolutely.
we like to say, I mean, we who come from the Western Hemisphere, we like to say, that's a collectivist society. There are no freedoms, and it's so difficult to live there. And it's difficult, yes, it's difficult to live
It
in a
can
closed
be.
society.
If you're
Yeah, it
Japanese,
can
it's
be,
really difficult.
especially if
Right.
you're
If you're
Japanese, right?
Americans, it's easy. If you're outsider, it's a little
Yes,
easier,
Right.
right?
yes. But we also need to recognize the fact that this peer pressure also has played a major role
Of course.
in,
Yeah.
yes, in
Of course.
creating Japan of
Right.
today. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's pluses and minuses with everything. To me, the pluses, we always say this, the pluses
Yeah.
greatly outweigh the minuses. And it's not
Yeah.
for everybody. For some people, they don't believe that and they probably don't belong here, right?
Right.
And that's
Right.
not a bad thing. It's just how they are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But Emmanuel, just like you, I have had several people reach out to me from overseas and ask me, what should I do to move to Japan?
Japan.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Well, I think you're
Because,
going to see more of that. I mean, as you may know, recently, especially in the United States, the cut of funding for science and the various cuts back for research, for education, and for that matter, in diplomacy, international relations, sorts of cultural activities, is really changing the landscape. And there are people out there, I'm sure, including people listening to us, who are sort of wondering, where do I go from here? And I would say, I think probably we all agree that Japan has a unique characteristics, unique opportunities here.
Yeah, they're here. I mean, there's expertise required to leverage that to figure it out, but
Mhm.
it's here. It's here. I completely agree. I'm like you. I'd rather be here than anywhere else on earth right now at this point in
Mm.
time. Like I'm
Absolutely.
really happy
Absolutely.
here. Yeah, I
yeah.
really
Uh,
here. So
Yeah. But also, so Emmanuel, what do you say to those people who ask you, what should I do to come to Japan? Or do you tell them, or
good
okay,
question.
or what are your thoughts? Do you think, oh, you should come here and try it, or you should
oh,
not?
yes. I think you should. I even told my mother to come, but that didn't work. But I have, let me say this, I have, say, 4 or 5 friends who are in the process of trying to find ways to get here. I mean, first to visit, and then to see if there's some long-term way that they can settle down. And I think all of them would be serious, even if they don't speak speak Japanese, that if there
Mm-hmm.
was a way to stay here, they would much prefer to be here. And there are certain approaches to this. I think to some degree it's on an individual basis what you're looking for. But there are I found Japanese also who are open. I mean, to working with us. Japan is a open. I mean, I guess it's a relative issue. I mean, when I came here in
Yes. Mm.
1987, the United States seemed like a more open society than Japan in terms of receptiveness to foreigners, etc. But that's not where we are in 2025. Things have changed significantly, and Japan has been remarkably. It's not open in everything. I mean, it's hard to get visas for certain kinds of people, and there are. I wouldn't say not without discrimination in certain groups, but overall, if we compare it with what we see in Europe or in the United States,
Right.
or for that matter in Australia and New Zealand, it has this enormous potential.
Right.
I was
It's
just going to say, though, I believe that in the US, that it's polarized, obviously. And that means that there are people who are, I believe, I know lots of people who are extremely open. Now, I
Mhm.
would say the larger cities, the urban areas, tend to be more accepting because you have to. You're living with other people. You're right there,
mm-hmm.
exposed to them. That's what I'm saying.
Right,
That
right.
human exposure is so powerful because all the stereotypes melt away, and then you see the human being. Like and so
Right, right.
you can see those patterns in the U.S. of big
Mm-hmm.
cities
Mm-hmm.
tending to be, more inclusive, whatever word you want to use, right? And
Right,
then when you
right,
go out to the rural areas, and it has nothing to do with race. It
right,
has everything to do with the rural
right,
mentalities. Because I
Right.
right,
lived in the
right.
South, and they did not accept him from Chicago. Like I was the Yankee from the North. They were polite. They were
Right,
very,
right,
they were very polite and civil, but they didn't accept me. And I didn't whine about it because I'm like, I'm in a small town. I didn't grow up here. They did. Of course, that's
right.
who I am.
I
I'm
Well,
an
get
but
outsider.
I mean, I was in Champaign. You just drive 2 hours south of Chicago, and you'll find yourself in a different territory.
Right, right. I used to drive through there. Yeah, I used to drive
well,
that a lot. And also through Indiana, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
when
you're
you say
right.
Champagne, I thought that you went to Europe, to France, and sorry.
Oh,
No,
well,
no, Champaign, Illinois, out in the
Illinois,
woods.
yes. I mean,
Okay.
so I'm from the Midwest. I mean, I grew up in St. Louis, and I taught at University of Illinois, and that's in some ways very familiar to me. Uh, but Asia has had enormous appeal to me, basically from the beginning of college, and Japan. I felt then, and I feel even more strongly now, it was going to be critical to understand Asia and
Mhm.
especially to know the languages. So I put an enormous amount of effort into that aspect, being able
Yes.
to give
Yeah.
presentations in these languages. And I think right now, I would say to everybody, look for opportunities, and I'd be happy to engage. I mean, I think we're happy to engage people who are
Yeah.
looking for opportunities here in Japan.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now let me say thank you to our other sponsor.
Good.
Yes.
Did you hear
Okay.
my alarm go
I
off?
did. I did,
Okay,
Tim. Thank you
good.
for setting it. Yes. Okay. So, and well,
We're high
really,
tech here.
yes, a huge thank you to Houze, or as they are also known, Houze Inc. You can find them online, or you can find them also in Yokohama. This is another company based in Yokohama, and they work in that area. They do projects in custom home design and construction. They also work in commercial building construction. So, if you have any projects in mind in these fields, please reach out to them. You can reach them through the email, which is here on screen at the moment, their webmaster's email, or you can also connect with Hana Howell, who is on LinkedIn, and you can easily reach out to her and say hello and talk with her. Both James and Hana, Houze and Kanchu can offer their services in English and in Japanese, so please do not hesitate. It doesn't matter whether you speak Japanese or not, they will help you with your project. So thank you very much for your patience too, Emmanuel. Now let's move back to the conversation. And
And
you mentioned
yeah,
language. Oh,
I
yes.
just wanted to say though, I did want to make one thing clear. You know,
Yes.
yeah, there's this stereotype of the Japanese as not being inclusive, and I guess certain metrics might indicate that. But I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to say my experience from the time I got here in 1977, I
Mm-hmm.
found them to be more inclusive than any group of people I've ever been with. Not all of them, but my group of
Mm-hmm.
friends that I became very
Right.
close with, 45-year relationships, I'm still close to all of them. They're like family,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They were so patient with me. I didn't know the rules. I was stupidly breaking cultural rules without knowing it. And they were so accepting and forgiving, and they nurtured me as their friend. And like they helped me when I, first came and I didn't have any work. They got me English students, and like they were extremely inclusive. And I'll say the same thing about my in-laws. My mother-in-law was kind of hard at first, but the rest of them, even today, I feel like I'm part of the family. I don't feel any exclusivity. So what I'm saying is stereotypes are very dangerous because some people might say,
Right.
oh, they're not inclusive. Put in the right situation, I found them
Right.
to be some of the most inclusive people to a fault, almost
Mm-hmm.
to a fault. That's
Right.
how
Yeah.
Right.
inclusive I found my experience. That's it, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can only speak for
Sometimes,
that.
yes, as you say, stereotypes, and if we keep believing in them, they're self-fulfilling as well.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Exactly. That's how you choose to interpret it,
Right.
through
Yes.
those lens. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So we
Yeah.
do have to be careful there. But
Absolutely.
yeah. So, and Emmanuel, if you don't mind me asking, why did you move to Japan? If you don't want to answer the question you
We,
don't have to.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't think there are multiple factors here. I had the opportunity. I had people here in Japan who wanted to work with me. I There was a personal aspect to it in that uh, I've been married to a Korean woman who passed away, and so that sort of redirected me. I no longer had the connection to Korea that I had at a personal level, and my field was Japan, so I started drifting back a little bit. Um, but I also felt the certain energy in Japan, that there was these opportunities here that I didn't find. I mean, it's not like I could just go anywhere, right? But it's like Korea, Japan, the United States, and Japan was overwhelmingly the appealing place to be. And I came here on a short visit, and a friend of mine arranged for me to give a talk at the Diet. I think a month later, which was a significant event, and I couldn't. I mean, it was something like I had not been able to do stuff like that in Korea anytime recently, and I saw an openness with the people that I met. They were willing to engage, and so I got a contract to publish my book in Japanese, and another contract for another book, and I guess most importantly was personal. I had people I felt quite close to. People say that long-term relationships are important in Japan. That's true, but my experience is perhaps a little bit different in that most of the people I work with in Japan now are people I met in the last 2.5 years, and my network as an academic, as a professor at Todai, University of Tokyo, and elsewhere,
Mhm.
are not central in my life today. I would say mainly because I've changed. I'm not a
Yeah.
professor now. I'm not teaching, in fact, now. And I found that I was able to establish quite good relationships of trust with Japanese in a relatively short period of time.
I
Uh,
agree. There are ways to build trust
Yes.
rather quickly.
Hmm.
There are, contrary to
mm,
popular myth. I agree with you.
Yeah.
mm.
I agree with you.
And so I was impressed by that. Now, of course, I have an advantage in having studied Japanese for many years, but I am meeting people uh, in the time I'm here who are here for various reasons. Some of them recently, and they are thriving. I think they feel that there's an openness in Japan, a potential here uh, that we don't really find elsewhere. We don't really find elsewhere. So I'm with Tim in that respect. I don't really want to move somewhere else. I mean, I was never a island hopper type person. I like to go somewhere and be there and understand it. But for me, I intend to be in Japan to be base of operations for me personally, and I welcome people to come. I mean, I have people coming through, and I have one of my students who wants to come back. I mean, as I was saying, another associate of mine from Asia Institute who wants to be back here. People who had no particular connection with Japan. A good friend of mine from Colorado was, I think, quite seriously considering whether it might be possible to sort of move here, even invest here, find some opportunities. So, yeah, it's a happening time right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing, and I hope that Japan will stay this island of stability, will remain an island of stability, because I think that external forces have, throughout history, of course, and in modern history as well, external forces have tried to push Japan to the left, to the right, or up and down, and so on and so on. And while the Japanese say yes, yes, of course, yes, yes, they continue to to move in the direction they think they should be moving.
Right.
So,
Well, first of all, they're like, okay, guys, hold on. Let's think about this, right?
Right.
So how do we adapt, right? How do we survive?
Yes.
And what's the question?
What's the question?
Let's figure out what the questions are, and then
Right.
we'll try to answer them as best we can. Like, they're very strategic, and but when they're pushed in that box, they get really creative. I mean, like Commodore Perry, that's a really good, that kind of encapsulates it, right? So
right.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I love that about Japan. I mean, when I came here almost 24 years ago, it was driving me crazy, this slowness of everything, and the question of what is the question and everything. But once you get used to it, you appreciate the positives to this thing as well.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense in the moment, but when you look at it over time, it's like, oh, that's what they were going for,
right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know from some working with Korea and Japan, for example, that a lot of Korean art, classical works, survive in Japan, all lost in Korea. So if you want to research the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th century in Korea, you should be in Japan, because Japan, they value things. They preserve them. The culture sort of keeps things from the past, and there are different levels of Japan. There's like Japan from the Tokugawa Edo period. There's Japan from the Heian, and there's Japan from Kamakura. There's a samurai Muromachi period, and these different levels of history, of culture, they exist simultaneously in Japan. So it's a very sort of diverse internal culture, and that's not true everywhere, I would say, in the world.
Yeah, they love art, as you said. I asked a guy from Toyota once. He was an engineer. And I said, what do you think the cultural reason is behind the Japanese obsession with quality? And his answer, I didn't see it coming. He said, oh, that's easy. We admire beauty. That's his connection to quality. That's his image. It's a very Japanese image, and it's a beautiful image. That's the essence of quality. I never thought of it that way until this guy told me. An engineer told me that.
That's fascinating, because it now makes sense. One thing makes sense for me. I remember when I was here in Japan, maybe several years already, and then Yuichiro Koizumi, he was running for the premiership, right? And he ran on one motto, "Beautiful Japan." I think it was him, right? And I was like, as a foreigner, and I was like, what's this, beautiful Japan? What does it mean? How can a politician actually, we're not going to talk about politics, but this is connected to what you just said, right?
Beauty is a core value here.
Yes,
Absolutely.
beauty is a core value, but it means
Harmony,
so much
beauty, it's all
more.
tangled up.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
but it means so much more, right? Because beauty is to the eye, and then
Yeah.
to the soul and the everyday life, you have quality, you have harmony, you have everything. And now this makes sense to me. Why
mm,
that politician ran
But
on, beautiful
yeah,
Japan.
but they see the beauty in everyday mundane objects, and they treat those objects, the whole animism thing from Shinto, they
right.
treat those objects, even in a factory, their tools are shiny, they take good
Right.
care of it. All my friends wash their cars regularly, they maintain them. Their guitars, they wipe them down every day, and like they take care of their stuff, their
Right.
everyday stuff. Again, if you don't have a lot of natural resources, then you're going to value things, and you're going
Right.
to think mottainai when things go to waste. And like so much is driven from that scarcity mindset.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
still like woven into the culture. And you see it every day by the way they treat their stuff with
Mhm.
Right.
reverence,
Right. Right.
So yeah,
And
Ichiro treated his bat like a kamisama and his glove. And he used to get mad when American players would throw their mitts or throw their bats. So like that to him, that was blasphemy. You honor your bat and you honor your mitt and you take care of it
right.
and you treat it
Right.
right. Like a completely different mindset towards stuff.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons in the issue like quality that like concepts from the United States, whether it's we're talking about quality control or just in time, it had a certain logic. It was in the United States, but it's sort of like just lying around there. But when it came to Japan and it was combined with that sort of mindset and that sort of spiritual cultural
It's a
sensitivity,
religion here.
then
Quality. Yeah.
that this new potential in quality control or just in time was sort of realized in a way that it couldn't really be done in other countries.
Right.
Yeah.
That it couldn't. Yeah. So I once did a gig where the Japanese president, I did cross-cultural communication,
Mm-hmm.
and he took me out that night and said, "Will you teach total quality management?" And I said,
Mm-hmm.
That's not my field." And I turned it down, and I said, 7 quality tools. I'm sure you have people. He
Right,
goes,
right.
"We already taught them that." Here, they haven't internalized
Ah,
it. They don't care, and we got to get them to care. Like that's what
right,
I want
Mhm.
you to teach them, how to care. So to him, TQM was getting everybody to care, and the rest were just tools you give them to express that they care and they want to improve. Like
mm-hmm.
to him, to the Americans, it was systems, like you just said.
Right, right,
To him, it was a spiritual mindset that was missing, and
right.
that blew my mind as well. I didn't see that coming, right? So it makes
Mhm.
sense to me what you're saying. Yeah, yeah,
Well, we find that, I mean, for Americans, and sometimes this leads to misunderstandings, obviously, but in America, it tends to be here's your contract. This is what you do, this is what you don't
yeah,
do, right? And
yeah,
people in America, especially, God forbid, if they're lawyers, they have a very clear sense of like what they're responsible to do and what they're not responsible to do. But in Japan, it doesn't work that way. You have sort of larger responsibilities to be human, to be considerate, is omoi and the moyari
right,
ideas, and so. I mean, sometimes it's a problem because people don't follow the contract to the letter, but
yeah,
it can also be more human. I mean,
Right.
I've
yeah,
encountered, in America, some rather
right,
inhuman ways in which people just take the contract to the letter, even if
right,
it's
right,
somewhat cruel.
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah. I'll go
go ahead,
ahead.
go ahead, Maya.
No, I just wanted to say that in my one of my courses that was quality management, I think.
Hmm.
And our teacher, he is a former JAO executive,
Hmm.
and he said that for many people, his colleagues, basically the motto was "人間として正しいことをする,"
Hmm.
and that
Yeah,
was the
as a
base.
human, as a
Right?
human.
Yes, do the right thing as a human, and everything else
Right.
comes next.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
as an example of your contract, so I
Mm.
was in the automotive industry, and when you make a part, it's custom, and so the contract is tied directly to your blueprints.
Right.
Okay, And in the US, there's a standard, ANSI standards, where everybody follows the same protocols for their blueprints. So it's easy to communicate with everybody. But the Japanese, Toyota had the Toyota way, Honda had the Honda way. Everybody had their own way of doing it.
Right.
And it was often ambiguous. There were ambiguities. And there'd be a little notation. If there's a disagreement, both parties will do their best to find resolution. And my accountant and lawyer saying, no. We have to make it really clear. We have to figure out a way to measure the surface smoothness and agree on it. Otherwise, we can't do it. And it shows these long-term relationships that Japanese have had with their tooling suppliers, where they just work it out. It's we've been working together. Of course, the advantage goes to the higher ranking, customer, of course. But so yeah, I saw that, at a very practical level, the ambiguity of it.
Right. I mean, ambiguity is a big part of Japanese culture. It's a part of the aesthetics, and it can be quite beautiful. I mean, the use of shadows and and light and art, and but also the way people present. I mean, they have a way of being both performative, in a sort of kabuki sense, but also mixed with a certain sincerity, right? That
yes.
They're both putting on a show for you, but they're also in that show they're sort of giving you a sort of an insight into their deeper their thoughts, their spirit.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like, I'm doing tatemae, but I'm doing tatemae.
Right, exactly.
The reason I'm doing tatemae is because I want to be face, and I want to be kind, and we all know I'm doing it, but let's all do our roles, right? And then over a beer later, we'll do the honest talk,
right?
And everybody knows the rules, right? And so you got to read it, right?
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, but if the tatemae interaction goes smoothly, chances of going to hone, right, are so much higher.
Here's the thing: Americans do tatemae just as much, but they don't want to admit that they do it because they value the truth, and they want everybody to think they're always truthful. And we're just as full of, we're all humans are that way. We all have our tatemae, different degrees of it, different interpretations and situations, but we all have it. It's just, but America, we just pretend we don't have it. Maybe we call it a white lie. That's about the closest term we got.
Well, I find that aspect of Japan also be extremely refreshing. So America is also a very hierarchical society, but we don't like to talk about hierarchy, right? It's like, we're all,
so we call each other by first names to camouflage.
Yeah, that's exactly. In the corporate world, it's particularly true, right? People are like, "Oh, we're all buddies, we're all the same," and then you look at like salary or benefits and forget it. It's like there's a hierarchy. It's like there's no flexibility at all. In Japan, it's actually more flexible in some respects, less hierarchical. But the difference is in Japan,
agree with that.
Hierarchy is something you can talk about. You say, "Oh, this is a hierarchy issue. This is what it is." Whereas in America, it's like, oh, that doesn't exist,
Right. Or like a taboo.
We deny reality. And again, the first name thing is to make us all feel like we're kind of equal. Like, I used to call our chairman Stan. Hey, Stan, how you doing today? Stan was the chairman, though.
Right.
So, I love these nuanced conversations that kind of go against the common stereotypes. Like the other one is the Japanese are indirect. Yes, in some situations they're extremely indirect, and in some situations they're brutally honest. Not brutally, but they're honest. If you're in the inner group, in fact, that means they're close to you. That's why they're telling you. That's why they're being direct with you, for that reason. It's almost a barometer of the relationship you have with that person.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, to quote again this guy I often quote, he said, anything you can say about the Japanese, you can also say the opposite. It just depends on the context. It's so contextual. So that's a more nuanced way to try to view Japan, is that you can't just assume that one stereotype fits every situation, or but while recognizing that there are trends in behavioral
Yeah.
tendencies, macro,
Mhm.
if you look at the macro.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And personal characters too. I'm
Yeah,
like,
of course.
not everybody is the same. They're
Absolutely.
different. Yeah.
Well, there's some sort of practical things for people interested in Japan. I mean, one of the things I said, the great appeal of Japan is you can go to a convenience store and there's things you want to eat. I mean, this is
Healthy.
this is not true. I mean, even in Korea, or in the United States, you go in the convenience store and a lot of this stuff is, it's like high sugar processed foods.
Exactly.
It's stuff you don't really want to put in your body too much. But in Japan, you get fruit, and you can get a onigiri. I mean, I really, when I was in
Obento,
Korea and the
Bento, yeah.
U.S., I was like, why can't we sell
oden.
something like a onigiri? You could like real food that's like healthy for you. It's like right
Yeah,
there,
Mm.
and it's not that expensive.
it's not.
Uh, and we somehow the United States is for Western countries in general just somehow just can't do that. We
Mm.
can't just give the basic things that people need.
Yeah. And if you're a poor student like I was once upon a time, you go at night when the bentos are half off and they're just trying to
Right?
get rid of and they're still great, I lived
They
off
are.
those bentos. Yeah. I lived off them.
Right.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now
No, you're right. You're right.
yeah.
And not only that, now, like my wife, I hear this from my wife. She goes, "Oh, I heard Lawson has this great natto
Yes. Yes.
like suddenly Tokuin not there, and you go there to buy that one thing, like often like a
Right.
pastry. So that
Right.
even the
Right.
stores are getting reputations for certain items that
Yes.
everybody loves. So
Right.
it's amazing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And quality and quality products at your
Those I want
local
to eat high
convenience
quality.
store. Right. Right. That's
Yeah.
impressive.
It is impressive, yes. And the fact that they can actually supply those fresh foods and have them fresh all the time, right? Without
Right.
too many preservatives in them. I mean, with onigiri, they're basically sold within 6 hours of being made. So
Hmm.
they contain no preservatives. And I mean, obento is the same thing, right?
Right.
So the logistics there, it's just, I don't know, it's out of this world, I believe, especially for a Westerner like
Well,
me.
logistics is another. I mean, when you see people doing, the high touch delivery system, the people within companies that deliver products, the boxes, the packages, it's amazing just how effective they are. And you send something in a letter pack, and it'll be the next morning. It'll be like
Yeah.
in 8 hours, it'll be on the desk of whoever you send it to, and you can be sure of it. There's not going to be as some other places
Mm.
these uncertainties, if something gets lost or mixed up. The quality is really good. People work together efficiently. They have their personal task, and that their daily assignment is like it's second to nothing. They're going to do their job. They're going to do their job and do it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other
So
day, yeah, I just wanted to say we had a podcast with Chiaki Yanagimoto, and she's
it was great.
yes, Los Angeles-based producer, film producer, and
Hmm.
also a director. And one thing she said, society in Japan works. It just works.
Stuff
And
works.
Hmm.
yes, works. And many people who have been in Japan long term and people who are born here, they take it for granted. But if you're out of Japan, you cannot
I
really
get so
take anything for
mad.
granted.
Why doesn't it work in my home country?
Right, right, right,
Why,
right.
why don't you show up when you say you're going to show up? Why do I have
Yeah.
to wait between 8 in the morning and 5 o'clock for your serviceman to come?
Right, right, right.
So yeah, I know you get spoiled. Japan spoils
Right,
you. Like,
right, right.
so, kind of circling back a little bit, Emmanuel, like I agree that the conditions have not improved in terms of what at a national level setting stages for this, like this kind of human cooperation.
Hmm.
But that makes it to me even more important for people like us at the grassroots level to do whatever we can
Absolutely.
to connect people. And if you ask me and Maya, whose side are you on? We always say we're on the side of peace. You know, we're on the
Absolutely.
side of
Absolutely.
victims of the world,
Right.
no matter what their nationalities. We don't care. You know,
Mhm.
and in that sense, we're not partisan. We're about bringing people together. There's other people doing the other stuff, the divisive stuff, and that's not our
Right.
space. That's not our wheel. Our wheelhouse is bringing people together. So, your thoughts on like what can people like us do to
Mhm.
continue promoting this and facilitating these opportunities for people to connect and understand each other better and humanize each other.
Right. Right. Well, this obviously is part of that. This discussion today, we have various different groups. I mean, for example, like Nagato Cho Forum, where people get together, and I certainly feel strongly about that. That's what I'd like to do in the future. Is to have regular events, invite people, Japanese and internationals, and create an environment in which they feel comfortable interacting with each other, and unlock through. It sounds sort of foolish, but it's in a way it is really critical that you get people together in an environment where they feel comfortable, where they can talk about what they're doing, they can listen to what other people are saying, and they, if they find some sort of synergy or some correspondence, they can actually act upon it. And
Right.
if we can
Yeah.
do that, I think not only can we make new connections between, say, people like ourselves and Japanese who may have similar interests, but they never knew how to go abroad, or they didn't think about this aspect of it, and they can offer something to us. But we can also get Japanese thinking about themselves in new ways, to unlock the potential. And that is the history of Japan in a way, that it has had waves of foreigners come in, from the fall of the Tang Dynasty, from various disruptions in Korea, where intellectuals came over, or artisans came over, uh, uh, and they came in waves. And each time they came, they created a sort of a period in Japan. But then Japan evolved from that
Mhm.
stimulation in its own way as an island, and I think we're seeing some of that again. This
Oh
new
yeah.
wave, people coming in from around the world. But the ultimate sort of goal, I think, is not to create a bland Disneyland, in
Right.
Japan, but it's going
Please
to be something
don't.
Japanese. It's going to be something
Yeah.
Japanese. It's going to be
Yeah.
maybe interpreted in a different way, evolve in a new way because of this new input of people from around the world. But Japan in itself is a tremendous sort of foundation to build on. There's no, I don't think we have a need to like import our, as Tim was saying, our systems. We have to like bring all the American system for how to do business. We bring a perspective, an understanding, a sort of a sort of holistic approach that we have, and that the Japanese are open to, and that
Yeah.
interplay, sort of interference pattern between what we bring with us and what Japan has in originally, creates these new patterns.
Yeah. And even when they do choose to bring in a system, I mean, they brought in Henry Ford and all that, they still repurpose it to
Right.
fit their, like they jeopardize it
Absolutely.
to fit
Right.
their values and culture. What fits, they put it in. What
Yeah.
doesn't fit, they either change it or get rid of it. And that's one
Mhm.
of their genius moves in so many
Absolutely.
things they've done throughout history. So I
Yeah.
agree.
I mean, quality control is the perfect example of that, which I guess in the United States was dismissed. I mean, people were not interested in this, and the Japanese took to it immediately, but they modified it for Japanese culture, and it was far more successful than the original concept in the United States, and
Yeah, they brought it
became
from checking products at the end and looked at the process
right.
oriented. They brought it up a step forward and said, if we control the process, we know the outputs will be good. So like those kind of innovations, yes, that's a good example. Yeah. Oh,
Right.
wow. This was fun. I could talk to you for hours, but thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time. This was fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Thank you.
Um, Time
Right.
flies. when you're having
Time
fun.
flies, yes. So I know that you're going to get even busier than you are now, but at some point, maybe
Thank
we
you
can.
so much. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I hope we can continue the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes, and well, work probably together to bring people, more people together uh, than than now.
And
So
if you do choose to have events, let us know. We'll be happy to broadcast it for you. You know,
Well,
um,
I would certainly want to say that if I'd be happy to help organize events to bring people together. I mean, I did this in I mean Asia Institute, which is my main sort of platform in Korea. I did that, and I found the most helpful was to have organized an event. Uh, it's like gardening, right? You don't want to like tell the tree to grow, whatever, but
right,
you bring together different people from some artistic and cultural, some people technologically, and some people sort of political, institutional, and some of them foreigners from different countries, some of them Japanese. And you create an environment where they can interact with each other, and you do it regularly so that they feel comfortable. And
yeah,
that's what I'm really interested in.
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, I think it's a beautiful thing, and we're here. We promote that stuff openly for everybody. We want that's what we're
Excellent.
about. So let
yes,
us know any way we can, get the word out for you if you choose to do it. I think it's
Right.
great, and anything that brings people together.
Excellent.
yeah,
Well, I encourage everybody watching to reach out to us with your ideas and thoughts, and look forward to meeting everybody.
very much so. Yes,
For
thank you.
sure.
Great, and well, to everybody who watched us or will watch us later, have a great day and happy midweek and successful reminder of the week as well. We'll be here once again on Sunday and later next week again on Wednesday and Friday. So that's all for the moment. And one more,
Sponsors, yes,
yes,
are
for
important
our
sponsors.